the end, so I know you guys might have questions and stuff. Just anything, save them until the end, we'll do some questions. This has all 4 basic elements. It has a lamp, which if you're going to have only one lamp, I recommend the HPS over the MH. It gives you a controlled environment, so you can relatively control your temperature, certainly get airflow ventilation, certainly add CO2. You have your containers and your medium, waters and nutrients, and that's really all you need. In a setup like this, put a folding table in there, get your lamp. I estimated about $400 to $500. You could be up and growing. That's not counting, spending like $200 on seeds, which is ridiculous. Don't do that. And tents is another turnkey solution, and I'm really actually starting to come around on. This could be a tent for all intents and purposes. The first graphic that was up at the beginning, that was a tent. The tents are great. They're a little expensive though, so if you're a first timer starting out, it's a little tough, but it gives you can carve out a space with a tent. So you could say, well, I don't have a closet, but I want to do this in my garage. You get all sorts of tents, and what I like is they have all the fittings and trimmings. They got the hole for the fan, the ventilation. They have the hooks for the lamps. Some of them even come with filters attached and stuff, and it's a really good package for a beginner. So this is what I think, when you're starting out, a couple of basic tips. You take your exhaust from the top, obviously, hot air rises, get the hot air out. Take your intake from the bottom, bring cool air in, very important, the air exchange. If you wanted to do something a little bit crazy, you could add a CO2 boost bucket. You see these things, you don't need a tank of gas or a propane burner. They have these organic little things you could buy for $50. They're great, they'll bump your ppms up to 650, that's perfect. People say, what's CO2? Oh, I'm pumping 2,000 ppm. That's like a human on steroids, man. You're shredding all the plant's insides and everything. And it's great if you're doing a commercial run and for yield, but ambient CO2 around 400, you pump that up to 300 ppm and you're cooking. Put a little ventilation fan in here, helps get your plants a little stronger, like the wind does, waves them back and forth, they get a little bit more fibrous. Helps them transport the nutrients from the root zone up to the buds, produce more resin, very smart. And also, you see the watering can. I love the watering can, because that's what I tell everybody. For all of you who are thinking about starting, growing weed, don't worry about an automated feeding system right away. You got 6 plants, or heck, even 12 plants here, it's not a big deal. Get in there and water those plants yourself. You're going to learn so much being in that garden, looking at those plants. You're going to see little things, you're going to go, oh, I wonder about that. You're going to go look it up. And that's what part of being a student of horticulture is about, is being with the plants, having your hand in the dirt, watering the plants, feeding them. Maybe you sing to them, I don't know. Primary considerations. MH versus HPS, we went over that. Air cooling and proximity placement to canopy, I didn't mention that. That's something that's important. How close do you put your plants, or your lamp, to your plants? Really, the answer to that is you want it as close as possible. For every foot that you step down from your lamp to your garden canopy, your light intensity is decreasing exponentially. It's called the inverse square law. You might remember that from science class too. The problem with that is the closer you put them to your plants, you're bringing that heat down to the plants. Plants don't like it too hot. Plants want it around 68, 72 degrees. Yeah, that's the comfort zone. So if you're going to bring it down, you're going to have to air cool your lamps. Or you're going to have a room that has a nice little air conditioning system in there and keep that temperature down. These are all considerations to make. Containers, type, sizes, draining. Very important. Never let your plants sit in water. There's those little trays that come down. People just say, oh, it's just going to run off into the tray, and then the plant's going to suck it up. That water, you do not want that water to be sucked up. The pH and ECA of that water has changed significantly from the 5 minutes before when you poured it in. Then it sits there in the light. Maybe it gets mold, maybe it gets spores. We don't want plants sitting in water. We want it to run through. We want it to dry out. That's another key point. We want the medium to dry out. So people say, well, what's a watering cycle? Well, you know, that's part of being in the grow room. You got to see what your container size is, the medium you're using, and how much your plants are drinking. People forget that the roots breathe oxygen. The plant itself, above ground, CO2. Roots, oxygen. If the roots can't get oxygen, they're going to rot, and they're not going to be able to shoot the nutrients up into the plant. So you need that medium to dry out. It needs to be permeable. You see these great containers. People say, what are the good containers? The best containers are those fabric pots. Super breathable, airflow, dries out quickly, holds the water. That's my favorite. Air circulation, intake and exhaust, we went over that. Air filtration. For a beginner grow, I never did it. I rarely do it, unless it's a massive industrial type, room like this, and we're pulling air from outside in an industrial complex. You don't need to filter the air. That's going to add a lot of cost. Atmospheric controls, though, are important. You got to keep the temperature. Beginner grow, 10 plants, what have you. You can get that. You can let it get up into the mid-70s, but really, you get higher than 74, 75, and your plants are going to feel it. You're going to feel it on your yield and on your potency. So that's something to consider. You can either use AC. You got these little mini units now that can roll into bedrooms and stuff. They're pretty good. Or you can cool your lamps. I think we might have, no, we don't have a photo. But the lamps, the reflectors come with flanges on the side. You use ductwork, inline fan. It's not the best, but it will take the heat out of the room. It will keep it a few degrees cooler, but it tacks on a few dollars. So these are some choices that you got to make as a beginner, starting out. Well, what kind of grow system should we use? Well, to start, there's passive and active. A passive system has no moving parts. They're like these little bucket wick systems you see and stuff, and they're good. It lets the plants feed as they like to on their own kind of schedule. It's very easy for beginners. And then you have active systems. We're going to look at a few of those. It's really great, the automated hydro systems that they have out there. I'm a big fan of top feed. I feel like you're using gravity a little bit to your advantage there. I feel like you can control the dosing a little bit more easier than, say, a flood and drain, which I'll show you. And it kind of frees up your time a little bit. If you're in the industry and you have other jobs and stuff, and this isn't your whole life. Hydro medium versus soil or soilless mediums. Now that's what I'm saying here. See, a hydro medium or a soilless medium is actually the same thing. People kind of get confused about that. Anything that's not the soil from out there is technically hydroponics. Now, a soilless medium, which I think is the best, again, many right ways to do this, okay, so I'm not saying this is the only way, but the soilless mediums are cocoa, peat, and sphagnum based, peat and sphagnum based. Sometimes they're cocoa based. Sometimes people make custom blends, cocoa, perlite, vermiculite. And the reason why we're putting additives into these mediums, such as perlite or vermiculite, is because they're water absorbing. And then it's a little more forgiving for a beginner. You might miss a day where you water. So let's say your watering cycle is 2 days on, 1 day off, and then you go 2 days off because, it's your wife's birthday. And it is my wife's birthday.
Happy birthday.
We'll sing after this. So they hold water, they retain water. It gives the plants a little bit of a buffer. But also, wood chips, even the perlite, it kind of gives an airy quality to the medium. So like I said, so that the air can permeate, the roots can breathe in their oxygen. And then, the last consideration is what type of system are you going to use? And that's dependent upon, I think, what kind of medium you want to use. We have rock wool, we have clay aggregate, we have soilless mediums. I think those are probably the big three. When you water, if you compress that medium too much, you're not going to get the airflow. You're going to put pressure on the root system, they don't like that. And you're going to maybe, if it retains too much water, you're going to get root rot. You're going to start seeing brown tips in your roots and whatnot. So all these considerations play off each other. I know it seems like it's like so much work and so much to think about, but it's really not. I think it's fun. You know, it's just kind of like modeling. You're just kind of figuring out a system, and if you're like me, you're geeking out, trying different things. And, you know, you got the High Times to read if you have any questions. So what is hydroponics? We went over that. The soilless growth of plants. Here are the systems. A flood and drain, also known as an ebb and flow. A top feed, I'm going to show you some illustrations. A DWC, that's known as deep water culture. Those are the bucket systems that you guys generally see, and those are pretty cool. Those will grow really big plants. They're automated for water and irrigation purposes. What those do is they kind of hold the plant suspended, the root ball suspended in a netted pot, I guess if you will, and then it fills the bucket from the bottom out of a reservoir. It's a pretty neat system. And the last one is NFT, nutrient film technique. And you know what? I'm going to take that off this. I think NFT is retired. Again, I don't ever see that. And that was something that was more like developed by NASA and like Epcot, if you were going to take that little tour. It's cool, it's like a real thin film and it goes through a trough and the roots hang down and kind of sap it up. That to me is a little too much air for the roots, I think. They get pretty dried out. Because really just the film isn't enough. And then the techniques for these systems, as I illustrated earlier, sea of green, or scrog, which is a screen of green. And to be perfectly honest, all sea of green is scrog. Everybody's using trellising now. We're going to go over it at the end. I'm a big firm believer in it. That's simply where you kind of just take a mesh netting, maybe 4-inch squares, and you grip it over the top of your garden canopy, and you let your plants come and grow up through it. And as it does it, you're pruning, you're topping, you're getting the offshoots, and you're pulling those side branches up and out and basically training your plant. In the process, you're opening that plant up to the light so it can penetrate and get down to the lower portions of your plant. It's getting better airflow through your plant, and it's forcing you, as the grower, to prune. People are afraid to prune. Gotta prune the plants. They don't need all that. When you see those big fan leaves like this, you know, and your plant is, 6 weeks old, that big fan leaf, that needs to go. It needs to come off the plant. Because what's happening is, they're less efficient. The leaves are less efficient the older they get. And by the time you see a leaf that's the size of your hand, that leaf is consuming more energy than it is producing for your plant. I promise you. So you can't be afraid, you gotta take that off. Another technique we're gonna talk about later is pruning, pinching off the topping. And that's a really great way to get the fullest potential in terms of yield from your plant. Alright, here's a little example. I'm sorry, some of these pictures are crude. I'm a little embarrassed, but this is a top feed system where you're gonna see what this guy is doing is he actually has slabs on the bottom. These are rock wool slabs. They're he still has it in the paper. And then he's got the rock wool cubes set on top. Probably because what he did was he started his plants in rock wool cubes, and then he realized, shit, that's not big enough for what I want to do, and then he put them on top of slabs. But what we're looking at here is the irrigation. You have a main line coming in with the offshoots. They're all valved, very smart. And then he's got what we call the little spaghetti tube lines coming out, and they have stakes, boom, and they stick right into the rock wool, and that's on a timer, and he waters it probably a couple of times a day for a few minutes. And like I said, then he's just gonna take a day off somewhere in there and let that dry out. So that's an example of top feed. Here's another better example of top feed, and what this person has added to the stake emitters is spray emitters. And these things are genius now, because what you're really doing is you're getting complete permeation of your grow material, spreading out. When you just use the drip, the drippers were just kind of like a one-shot out. It's just kind of, you can almost see after a few weeks, like it just will just burrow a hole right down through your medium, and like you kind of wonder if really the plant's getting it all. So I'm a fan of those. And I know this is like a little bit beyond the closet grow, but really it's not. And I'm going to show you another picture of a closet grow that you can do all this in. And it's this is the other thing. This is what I tell people. It's building. When you're starting out, we're talking about beginner grow. You're building. You're building upon your previous experiences. You're building upon your system. Maybe you get some money from work, a bonus, or it's Christmas gift, and you add another piece. That's what I tell people. Don't stress out. You don't have to hit a home run right away. This is supposed to be fun. It's certainly going to be fun after you harvest it. So. Is anyone smoking weed? I mean, seriously? Right? Just someone can't text me. Where's my wife? Bye. Okay, look, check it out. So this is the sea green one more time. So we have, no. That picture from the spray in there is from this garden. So this garden is being watered this way. Ash, buy it. It's her birthday. Hey. She's 22 today. Awesome, thank you. Keeping it. Okay, so now we've taken the first model that we showed, and this is the second setup, a little bit more advanced. Look at all the additions that we've now made, some of which we just discussed. This guy went crazy and he put 2,000 watts in a closet. That's crazy. That's really hot, yeah. Those should be 400s. And by the way, the most efficient bulb in terms of HID is about a 600. If you see those 750s, those are the best. When you get above 750 watts, you're not getting all the juice that you're paying for. So, and you're getting a lot more heat, which we don't want. But this is a good illustration here of an air-cooled system. He just used the 2 flanges right there. He's probably got an inline fan, yeah, right here on the outside. He's got his secondary exhaust fan for just any buildup in there. You notice that he's added, he got a Christmas gift. He added the Mylar roll, so the interior is probably reflective at this point. His inlet fan is too high, so we should tell that guy. I think you bring it in from the bottom. He brought in a CO2 generator. Oh, because of the shroud here. Yeah.
Your CO2 has to come from above.
Yeah, that's what he's doing. That's what he's doing. Okay. I don't recommend the CO2 burner for a closet. Honestly, I didn't draw this, but like I said, just get the little bucket, the mushroom bucket. It's great. And then he got tired of the watering can. See, he was like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to be cool and have an automated thing. So he put a flood table in here. This is probably a 4x4 tray. He's got a top feed, we like that. He did something interesting though. He's using the net baskets. This is what I was explaining in the deep water culture that they use. See how the roots kind of grow out of the basket? It's a nice idea. I don't personally like it. I like the harder mediums. I like the cocoa. It's more forgiving. It's giving you buffer. We'll talk about that in a second, the nutrients. Yeah, and that's pretty much everything that we just went over. You want a comparison shot. That's where we started. That's where he ended. Start, end. Okay? Are you tripping? No? Take it down. Look, back and forth. What do you want to do? This one, I don't know. Okay, I'm done. Okay, so a little bit more in depth here. Something that scares a lot of people, pH and ECE. What the fuck is pH and ECE? pH stands for possible hydrogen. It could stand for numerous different things, but that's the one I like. And that's because it's actually a measurement of how much hydrogen is in your water. This is important for only one reason. It's because this is going to affect how your plants uptake the nutrients that you give them. That's really even more important is the ECE, which stands for the electrical conductivity. I think it's just EC. I don't know what the other C's for. There's probably something, but it's really just EC. And what that is, I mean, now we're getting down to the molecular level here. Okay, we're at science. There's no guesswork here. We know. We know what nutrients work with what. We know how they link up. We know what the plant likes. We know when the plant likes that nutrient. Right? Give it more nitrogen in the beginning. We know these things. And that's what this is referring to. And it's not something that you have to be an expert on. You can buy a $25 EC meter or pH meter and get these readings. You want to keep your pH down around 6, a little below. It really depends on your system though. That's for hydro. You can get away with a little higher if you're using a sturdier, hardier medium. That's the other thing I want to talk about. The second point here, buffering of substrates. And right above it, nutrient lockup. These are, technical terms, but they're important to understand, especially if you're not growing organically. If you're using synthetic nutrients, those are derived from salts, mostly, and they can create what we call nutrient lockup. You hear about people flushing their plants, flushing their systems, not just before harvest, but continually throughout the grow process, and this is why. If you feed your plants too much, you make a mistake, and you're using a hydro system, and you're using a medium like rock wool, you're in trouble. You're going to get nutrient burn. And even worse, if you don't recognize the signs of the nutrient burn, which you should see in your leaves, and by the way, by the time you see it in your leaves, it's too late. Because then what you probably have is nutrient lockup as well. Which means all of those salts have solidified. And they've kind of coated and killed the hairs on your roots, and nothing's getting through. And you keep feeding it thinking, oh, it needs more of this, but it's a waste. So, how do you fight that? You're a beginner, you don't want to deal with this shit. You get a substrate that's more forgiving, that will buffer better. And when we say buffer, we mean almost quite literally that. Something that provides a physical barrier between the root and the nutrient solution. The mediums like a soilless mix we referred to earlier, the cocoa, the peat-based, those will help transfer the nutrients between the roots and the actual nutrient solution. Some of these other systems, like a flooding drain and ebb and flow, that's direct contact to your root system. It's not forgiving and it's not for beginners. For beginners, you really want to use a nice mix. You can make your own mixes, it's fun. Or you just go buy a big bag of it and it's pretty cheap. So that's what we're talking about when we say buffering substrates. And next, we want to say, what about your watering cycle? And that's what I was talking about too. It depends on your substrate. But what you're really looking for there is you want the medium to be able to dry out. You got to give it a day somewhere in there, at least once a week, to completely dry out. Your watering cycle could compress your grow medium. So you got to keep an eye on that. See it getting packed down. You're either watering too much or you need to amend your soil or your medium and put something in it that can help aerate. And then understanding the types of grow system and their benefits to your garden. I mean, this really comes down to space and time. In terms of the benefits of your garden, if you know what you're doing and you do a hardy hydro system in a flooding drain or something, or a deep water culture, and you know what you're doing, you're going to get a bigger yield. You are. You're going to get a bigger yield. Sometimes though, it's a trade-off. You might also get a little less quality. And that's what I'm talking about when I say overfeeding or overpumping CO2 in there. You want to maximize your plant's genetic potential, but you don't want to over-maximize. Now, some people might say, well, I don't really care. I just want to get as much weed as I can, because what's the difference between 18% THC and 16% THC? Okay, fair point. That's a fair point. It might affect your flavor. It might affect your terpenoid profile. So when you're talking about maximizing the genetic potential of your plant, we're not just talking about cannabinoids. We're not just talking about THC and CBD. We're talking about all those other terpenoids, which are responsible for the flavors and aromas. And let me tell you something. I am the competition director for the Cannabis Cup. I am. I run the whole thing. So fuck you guys, you 72 plants. No, I'm serious. These people come in, they pay me, and then they give me their weed, and then they ask me what I think about their weed. I don't judge the weed. I'm the competition director, and we have judges, some of whom are here. Thank you to all of you here for helping us with that. We have 40 expert judges. But where am I going with this? Oh, right. Cannabinoids, terpenoids.